It really comes down to organization and the goals and what they really want to look at as far as cost analysis. We know that reusable, you do have to do that laundering, but then you also take into effect the washing, the sending it off. Are you really going to get it back? You spend this money on these reusable towels, but is there a guarantee if they're laundering different facilities at the same time that you're really getting what you're putting in?
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
What's up, Sterile Processing Universe? It's Hank Balch in studio today with
Bobby Parker.
What's up, Bobby Parker? We are talking little things that make a big difference this season, and today's episode, this week's episode, is on the topic of OR towels. Kind of a little thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I wonder why we call them OR towels. I see them a lot in SPD towels, too, so maybe we'll call them surgical towels today. What
surgical towels. I like perioperative towels.
That's right.
Yes.
Inclusive language. We're all working together as a team.
You know, that reminds me, speaking of language, a great project we did that one day we may resurrect called the Beyond Clean Gold Mine. And it just went through all of these different words and different language that we use in sterile processing and started defining our terms. I think people would be shocked to know how many downloads that series has had, even though we haven't really promoted it here for the last couple of years. But yeah, if you go out there and Google Beyond Clean Gold Mind, like your brain, you can check out all the different terms, and we might even have towels on that dictionary. If we don't, that's maybe the first word that we're going to add to that when we relaunch that baby. Anyways, we've got a great guest that's joining us today, Tory Teakell from Medline, to talk on this towel conversation. So hang with us, and we'll be right back in studio to dive into this little thing that makes a big difference.
I'm Bobby Parker.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Clean Freaks, we are in studio now for this episode on these sterile towels that we see come through the department. Or I guess maybe they're not sterile sometimes when we see them, or maybe they are sterile depending on what kind of towels they are. But we're going to be talking about OR towels. We've got a great guest in studio with us today that comes from both perspectives. She's been on the clinical side of the table as well as on the vendor side of the table with the solution. So Tory Teakell is our guest today, the Clinical Solutions Manager for Medline Industries LP. And it's a small world. I was just up in Tory's neck of the woods a couple of weeks ago, and we were making the connections before we hopped on. So, you know, just another great reminder of how small this industry is, how connected we all are. And, you know, this podcast is a great example of that, of just paths crossing. So, Tory, really excited to get you on the show today. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And so I know we got your background a little bit, Tory, before we started recording, but I'm going to ask you again, for anyone who doesn't know you, can you just kind of give a snapshot of where you've come from and how you've ended up here doing what you're doing today with Medline?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Tory Teakell. I'm a Clinical Solutions Manager for Medline, like you mentioned. I have 11 years of experience in the operating room, ranging from surgical tech, RN circulator, charge nurse. I was an SPD manager for a little bit, and then went to OR nurse manager for a little bit, and then switched on over to Medline. I've been with Medline for about 2 years now. I hold a CNR certification and a CRCST certification, and I'm also pursuing my master's degree in health information management.
Wow. Wow. Busy, busy on the credential side of things. So
yes. And then
fantastic.
Traveling around the world in sales as well.
That's right. Well, anytime I hear people who say that they hold a CRCST or, any sterile processing credentials, but then also that CNOR credential, it makes me want to remind them that, hey, we've got a ton of CEs through Beyond Clean that you can recertify for your CRCST, but we've even got podcasts that are approved for points towards your CNOR certification. So if you go on CCI and you look up First Case, that's our perioperative podcast. You can see some great, free, awesome, creative points there to recertify. Anyways, not the point of this interview, but you made me think about that. The point of this interview is OR towels. And, that's a pretty broad category. So maybe let's just kind of take a step back and say, when we say this, what are we talking about? What are the different types, kinds of towels that we would use in the OR?
Right. There are a numerous amount of SKUs just with Medline, I know for sure. But there's a couple options when it comes to OR towels. You have sterile towels that come in packages of 2, 4, 6. There's blue, there's green, there's white. There's also X-ray detectable towels, which you can tell by the thread and the lining of the towel that they're X-ray detectable. On our side, they're usually like a yellow color. And then you also have non-sterile towels you can buy in bulk, which I see a lot of that in SPD. They buy bulk towels. And then OR as well, if they want to use to clean equipment. And then we also have non-woven towels versus the typical woven towel that you will see. And the non-woven towel is just the way they create it is a little bit different. The way it's manufactured is a little bit different. And it actually has less linting properties than the regular OR towel we see every day.
All right, Tory, that's a mind-numbing number of choices there. Kind of made my eyes cross for a minute. So to simplify it, because I'm sure the difference in choices there aren't just, color preference. Do you want the white, blue, green, or yellow one? So can you break those categories down a little bit more for us into what these things are used for? Like, why would somebody buy an OR towel? And, we probably have more familiarity in this audience with the sterile processing side of it, but particularly in the OR, like, why would you want these towels?
So usually for sterile towels and sterile packages, they're opening them because they need more towels. We know on the clinical side that we're lining our back table with our towels. We're lining our Mayo with our towels just to give that extra cushion, that extra barrier of protection to keep our field sterile. That's when I've seen them open the most. I've seen towels used to clean equipment during turnover. We used a lot of those, put those in our solution, used them to wipe down between cases, and then we'll put them in the linen bag.
Okay. My other question around towels would be the big difference between ones that are intended to be reused, maybe through like a local laundering facility or something, and the disposable one. Big questions around the economics and maybe sustainability of using disposables, like cleaning up every spill at home with a paper towel. But what would you say are like the big distinctives between that reusable product or a single-use one?
It really comes down to organization and the goals and what they really want to look at as far as cost analysis. We know that reusable, you do have to do that laundering, but then you also take into effect the washing, the sending it off. Are you really going to get it back? You spend this money on these reusable towels, but is there a guarantee if they're laundering different facilities at the same time that you're really getting what you're putting in? Because I believe a lot of the laundering services are by weight. So as long as they're sending you back what their weight was, it's not necessarily down to the last towel or blanket or, sheet. So you really want to look at that cost-wise, because we know buying sterile packaging, there's an added cost there with manufacturing. You're sterilizing the towel, you're packaging it, and then you're shipping it, right? So that really has to be up to the organization on whether they want to choose to do the reusable route or the disposable route.
Yeah. And you're totally right. I remember my laundry department or linens department, I guess, at the facility being consistently mad at sterile processing in the OR for throwing away their reusable towels and like continually charging us for buying brand new ones. And yeah, just a constant state of disgruntlement. But the economics of reusable towels isn't the point of this conversation. It is the little things that make a big difference. So now that we've kind of got an idea of what the options of towels are out there, could you maybe underline for us why OR towels make such a big difference for patient safety at hospitals?
So OR towels are made out of cotton, right? So the cotton fabric has that ability to produce lint, whether it's pre-laundered or not. There's still that possibility that lint is going to happen, right? So it's a huge deal that we buy the towels that have those low linting properties, that say pre-washed, that say that they're low linting, because that little bit of lint, those little particles in surgery can manifest in a incision and can cause a surgical site infection, can cause complications. So it's really, really important to really look at those keywords when ordering a product to see that it does say low linting, because you're wanting to protect your patients and you want the best patient outcomes. And you know that it costs the hospital money when you have a surgical site infection. There's like a 30-day, 60-day window after the surgical procedure where the hospital has to eat that cost because that happens. So you really, really want to look and make sure those key identifiers are on those items when you order.
Yeah, Tory, anytime we hear lint come up on the Beyond Clean podcast, it's always a throwback to a fantastic interview that we did with Dr. Wava Truscott a number of years ago that talked about, the potential impact of lint, but not only lint, any kind of particle that's not meant to get into that surgical site that you referenced. And so I think that's a very important point. And on the sterile processing side, it's one over the last couple of years that has really risen to be kind of in the air. Like everyone knows, if you're dealing with towels, that's a question that you need to be dealing with on its face. What type of towel is this? How are we prepping the towels? If they are reusable towels, how many times are we reusing them? And I wonder, just again, from your clinical experience, how do you see clinicians out there in the space today making decisions around the reusable towel conversation? Maybe let's just start there. How many times are these towels actually manufactured to be reused? And of course, there's a subjective kind of measurement going on there because it's assuming some things that, the care and handling is the same, or, that they're not being used in abrasive fashion or whatnot. So can you kind of speak to how people are making these decisions today?
I think you brought up a good point when you said, how many times can you reuse them? Because how do you really keep track of that? Especially when there's like not an indicator on the towel. There's not a tag to say, let me check this box, this and reprocess this time, right? That's a really another factor to consider when you're choosing between reusable and disposable. How do you keep track of that? It really depends on how they're going to use the towel too. Are you going to be using it strictly just to clean equipment? Are you going to keep track of that? And I think that's important to note that because we offer different color towels, a big distinguisher, and Medline uses it all across the board, is color. So if you have a reusable towel and you want to strictly use that for cleaning equipment, I would order to make those green. So hey, all of my green towels are reusable. All of my blue towels I know are going to be disposable.
Mm-hmm. I know we mentioned cotton earlier as, one of the things these towels are made of. Are they 100% cotton? Is there other materials that's involved in that? And I know you mentioned like the low linting options. What manufacturing process changes that from maybe the natural linting properties to the low linting properties that you kind of alluded to?
So I know that Medline works with a number of manufacturers, and we actually use recycled cotton and then towels that are manufactured with premium virgin cotton. The virgin cotton towels actually contain longer fibers to help reduce that prevalence of lint. Our 100% virgin cotton non-woven towels are our lowest linting alternative. And we've seen success with this towel, especially in cath lab. When they're wiping the wires, we have non-woven 4x4s that they use in cath lab to wipe the wires down, and they don't snag on that wire. And that's another big issue, is that sometimes those Ratex will fray, just like a towel will fray, because it's woven together. So we've seen issues with linting of towels, and we have success. So we always recommend that non-woven towel option when they're having issues with linting with the basic OR blue towel.
Well, it's really interesting. And you bring up the 4x4s. Are there any other categories of non-woven materials that come from cotton that we touch every day in healthcare? I wasn't even really thinking about 4x4s as a category.
So I know for sure that we have 4x4s, Ratex, and then we have towels that come in the non-woven options.
That's really interesting. So just like that, I'm sure there are a number of different things right under our noses that we don't think about. Towels certainly are one of those. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about where they came from, how they got there, how they're different from the one at the Walmart across the street. This is the one the manager gave me, and this is what we use it for. What are some of those commonly held misconceptions that you see out in the field around OR towels, or maybe some things that we take for granted that we don't really know the nuance of?
So I know one of the biggest misconceptions, and I see it all the time on, SPD forums. Can we put a blue towel in an instrument tray? Can we do that? And I think that because towels are cotton-based, adding an OR towel to an instrument tray could produce lint. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, right? So best practice when using an OR towel in terms of SPD, I would say, is to review the IFU. Do you know that you can put it does it say specifically you can put it in an instrument tray? And then look at industry standards and the recommendations. And then I would recommend using a product that is specifically designed for an instrument tray, like a white paper tray liner. I believe if you look at the materials for a white paper tray liner, it is still cotton, but it's so woven together so tightly, it's less linting than a basic OR towel. And it also comes in white. So when you do sterilize your instrument tray, and you open that instrument tray after sterilization, you can automatically notice a color difference. If there's like a brown tinge, if there's something going on, and it produces the question of, okay, I see this brown stain on my white paper tray liner. Maybe I need to look at my water quality. Maybe I need to do a further investigation. Something's going on there. So I'd always recommend using a product in the instrument tray, in the SPD space that is in the IFU, states that it can be used for this intended purpose.
That's a really great call out for the IFU. And to be honest, that white tray liner piece is probably why a lot of facilities don't want to put that in their trays. It's like that's going to reveal all their water quality issues and cause some conversations with the OR. But that is a really good point. I remember using those as kind of the inspection mats on the assembly tables in our sterile processing department, because it's a lot easier to see if you have any debris when you've got that white background and you don't have this reflective stainless steel surface shining you right in the eyeball. So a lot of good uses there. I'm curious, particularly for our sterile processing audience, are there any other good tips and tricks like that surrounding OR towels, just best practices that we ought to be aware of, or maybe some no-nos of things we definitely shouldn't do?
Right. Understanding the difference between surgical towels, which are single use, and then the towels used for cleanup, which are reusable. It kind of can be hard for clinicians to deduce when towels have been removed from their packaging. You can't really tell that this towel was sterile, this towel is reusable. So like I mentioned earlier, you want to use a different color to distinguish what's your reusable, what's your disposable. And then I was reading an article that stated, surgical towels are really specifically for wiping your hands during surgery, getting the blood and the biohazard off your hands, just to wipe down and, kind of start fresh without having to change your gloves if they're not contaminated. So you really want to use the towel for its intended purpose. I know we see it all across the board that we use towels in different aspects, but you really want to know and get that education as to what the specific purpose of the towel is.
So, Tory, you mentioned the color distinction between single use and reuse, do you see a particular color being used primarily for the sterile single use towels and then the other color for the reusable towels? Like, is it blue and green, or can it be flipped?
It can be flipped. I think we automatically just think that sterile towels are blue just because that's with how it comes in your sterile pack, right? You order it off the shelf, or you open that procedure pack that's specific for that case, and everything is in there blue. We call it a Medline blue for our SPTs, right? So I think that's an easy way to look at it. And then it doesn't have to be green. It could be white. It could be beige. I know we had an eco towel there for a while that it was like a tan towel, caused a big uproar in the OR world when they started seeing these beige towels. And you wouldn't think that the color difference would be a big thing, but it really, really is. So it's just up to the organization. If green and blue is, a good determining factor, they can do that, but they can also order white. I would think that if they're using white paper tray liners and SPD, that might be a little bit confusing. So that's why I just mentioned green as a good alternative for your reusable towels.
So, Tory, I love again that you're coming from a clinical background because you're able to speak to both, the solution side of this, but then also the practical side of this conversation. And one question here as we move toward a close that we've been asking all of our guests on this season, obviously OR towels, huge impact in a lot of different ways, workflow, sustainability, compliance. You called out the IFU piece, tracking, logistics, all of that, comes into play. But outside of OR towels, the theme of this season is the little things that make a big difference. And I just wanted to ask you, if you had to pick something else small that maybe people don't think about or overlook often in the clinical space, surgical services, what would be another little thing, in your opinion, that makes a big difference to outcome of patient safety, surgical compliance today?
That's a good question. I'll have to think about that for a second. When you're in clinical practice, you're so used to doing stuff day to day that you don't really think about those kind of things. Like with the OR towels, right? You see that, they're intended for wiping hands, but like I said, we see it off-label use all the time, lining our back tibble covers, lining the Mayo stand covers. So I think another possible item that you wouldn't think would make a big difference, I would say the Raytex and things, because they do fray. A lot of people use Raytex in labs to wipe down their instruments, like point of use cleaning, right? And they can snag on those sharp instruments and they can fray. And it really, I didn't know this until I started working for Medline, but they come in different plies for a reason. The higher the ply, the tighter it is weaved and woven together, so it's less likely to fray. So really looking at that, because if you take a Raytex and you spread it all the way out, right, you can pull it apart and you can see the big squares. You can see where it can fray. It's not a sealed edge at the Raytex, so it's a really big possibility to get a piece of that Raytex in a wound and cause the same thing as lint would do, right? So it's really, really good for the clinician to be aware of that when that happens. It's not just, it's snagging, I'll just get a new one, throw this one out. Be aware of that snag and make sure you're doing it on the back table versus right at the sterile field where it can get in the incision.
I love that. Yeah. That's a fantastic answer. And that's one of those topics that I definitely have not thought too much in the past myself. So I need to go back and do some research on the plies and, even on the material again, that those Raytex are made out of. I think that's really interesting call out there, Tory. So terrific interview today. We accomplished the vision that we set out to cover on this towel conversation and get people thinking deeper about these towels that, we see every day in all kinds of different scenarios. They're coming into the facility packaged in different ways. They're leaving the facility sometimes in the trash or in the laundry. And to just kind of stop and think why and what and how, I think we really highlighted that in today's interview. So, Tory, thanks so much for your time and for joining us today on Beyond Clean.
Thank you for having me. I loved it. I hope I can come back and do another topic.
All right, that was Tory Teakell, Clinical Solutions Manager for Medline Industries LP, talking about OR towels, Bobby. And again, like I told Tory before we wrapped, I think mission accomplished on this interview. We could have went a lot of places, and just like every other interview we do, we could have talked hours on this topic, but we had 20 minutes to get in and out, and I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we definitely touched all the bases as you summarized in the episode, the economics of it, the sustainability of it, the IFU compliance of it. Certainly lots to consider. And this conversation around off-label use of towels has sent my mind reeling, because I'm thinking back to all the off-label uses of towels that I've seen in the department, all the wild things that they get used for. Some that probably aren't going to hurt a patient, like using it to clean your case cart drains or whatever. Maybe that's not what that towel dreamed of being when it grew up, but I mean, certainly not going to hurt anything. But then also like potentially putting in lint in places that we don't want them, using them on patient wounds during surgery and all kinds of things. So that question of, do we go to our towel IFU and see what it's intended to be used for, is one that prior to this interview, I can't say I've thought about before.
Yeah, well, Bobby, the towel's not the only one doing things it didn't think it'd be doing when it grew up. I don't know if I envisioned myself working in sterile processing when I was a little kid, but I freaking love it, and it's awesome. And so, maybe those towels being used in SVD in weird ways are like, I didn't think I'd be doing this, but this is way more fun. All right. So with that, we're going to wrap this interview today and in this episode on towels, but we ain't done yet. We've got a couple more episodes in this season of the little things that make a big difference. If there's a little thing out there that we haven't covered in this series, but you want to hear us maybe cover on a future season, or I don't know, maybe with some blog content or some social media content, let us know at info@beyondclean.net. We'd love to hear from you, or comment in the comment section on any of these episodes that you see out there in the interwebs. But until we speak with you again next week, like we remind you each and every time here on Beyond Clean, keep fighting dirty.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.